everybody, I'm back again, and today I'm going to be making a part 2 of my last video, which was on cognitive distortions and thinking errors. If you haven't seen part 1, I would highly suggest going and checking that one out first. Although it doesn't necessarily matter what order you watch them in, I did kind of go into more depth as to what cognitive distortions and thinking errors actually are in part 1. So if you're confused about that, I would watch part 1 first. Like I said before, I am not a professional, and I don't claim to be, and I don't think that I've claimed to be in the past. And this information is just solely based off of what I learned in treatment when I went. And in the last part, the first part to this video, I listed 5 out of the 11 cognitive distortions. And I did put up on the screen definitions for cognitive distortions and thinking errors to kind of show the difference, because I looked it up afterwards while I was editing. And even though they have different definitions, they kind of still seem one and the same to me. So in my opinion, they're essentially the same thing, a thinking error and a cognitive distortion. But I could be wrong on that. There could be little differences that I'm not aware of. So if you definitely know the answer to that for sure, I would let me know, and let others in the comments know as well, so they can be more educated. Like I said, the first 5 were in the part 1, and I'm going to be starting on number 6. That was 7. 6, which is should statements. So I'm sure that if you took the time to think about it or paid close attention to it, you would realize that there are often times where you put should in front of your sentences, meaning like I should be doing this and I should be doing that. And I think as people, we often have a lot of things that are just expected of us and that we expect of ourselves, and a lot of those are valid and a lot of them aren't. So I think it's important to kind of figure out how to differentiate which should statements are accurate and should apply and when they shouldn't apply. These expectations can easily be taken too far and build up so much that we feel like we're just not doing a lot of the things that we feel like we should be doing. And this happens to me all the time. I'll just be thinking like, oh, I should have done this thing, or I shouldn't have shared that much information. And like, I'll just have a really hard time with sitting in bed watching TV for a day, because instead of like laying there thinking about like, oh my gosh, yeah, I get to have a day off where I can just watch TV, I'm not able to enjoy it fully because I'm so focused on all of the things that I feel like I could be doing with my time, besides that, all of the things that I should be doing, the expectations that I have for myself. And I don't think that I'm alone in that. And when you tie recovery into it, it can be really, really hard to make any progress when you're really hung up on those should statements, when you think things like, I should be able to do this on my own. In life, there are obviously a lot of responsibilities that we just have to take on. And there are definitely times where you really should be doing something and times when you really shouldn't be saying certain things. But like with anything, that can just be taken super far and become a really destructive way of living. And then when you go past the point of just making expectations for yourself and other people are making expectations for you, they're putting their should statements on you by saying things like, you should go to college, you should get married and have a family, and this can be just as toxic as your own expectations. To help with this, I would say that one thing that might help is to really think about the why. Why should you not be doing certain things or saying certain things? And if you really think about it, like for example, it's very obvious why you shouldn't drive 80 miles an hour down a residential street. But why shouldn't you tell somebody how you feel about something? I think that's where it gets a little bit more complicated, and so that's why it's more important to really dive into the reasonings behind that and figure out how much of them are distorted and how much of them are coming from a genuine, true place that actually has meaning. If you think something like, I shouldn't eat that cookie, and then your why behind that, your reasoning is because you already had a cookie today, or it has too many calories or something like that, then that's what makes it distorted. It's coming from a place of false logic that only applies because you've decided it does. So eat a damn cookie, or watch an extra episode of your favorite TV show because you enjoy it. If you've really thought about your answer and why your should is reasonable and not distorted, then that's where the should really should apply. Number 7 is mental filter, and this one is very similar to a couple of the other distortions that I listed in part 1, which are black and white thinking and discounting the positives. They're all very similar but unique in their own way, and that can make it really tricky to figure out which distortion you're actually experiencing, because so many of them very closely resemble each other. So for this one, number 7, let's say for example that you got an A on all of your assignments and you got a D on one of your assignments, and so you are just left with this feeling of not being good enough. You're letting that D have so much power, and you're filtering out all of the good grades and not treating the A's like they matter. So another example is that my ring just fell off. Another example is that I used to do performances all of the time. I would sing at farmers markets, at fairs, at holiday events, and carnivals even. And I would go up there, I would do my thing, sing, and then I would get compliments afterwards. But I was not able to accept them because I was just so focused on all of the flaws, everything that I did wrong. And not only was I not able to accept them by just simply saying thank you, but I had to point out these mistakes as well. I had to be like, no, actually I was not good because I made this mistake and this mistake and this mistake. And actually I think that's more of an example of discounting the positives, but to be perfectly honest, I don't see that much of a difference between the two. So for me, in that circumstance, it might have been helpful to just say thank you and leave it at that, even if I did not believe that the compliment was true. So that way I could have just trained my brain to at least not point out my flaws to other people, which would be progress. In the first example that I used with all A's and then a single D, I know that it doesn't work like that for everybody. It certainly did not work that way for me. I failed so many classes. But for that example, I would say to just pick one thing that you can be proud of. For example, those A's, think about the hard work that you put in. Even if you didn't succeed, even if you didn't get all A's, think about the hard work that you put into something, not the outcome, and reward yourself for that instead of beating yourself up about it. One thing that I found is really helpful for me to do lately is to actually go out and do something as a reward for myself, because then my accomplishments are more noted in my brain. It's something that I'm actually like celebrating and not just glossing over. And my wonderful aunt taught me that one. She got me in the habit, and I thank her greatly. Number 8 is emotional reasoning. And when you say things like, I feel stupid or I feel fat, then you're believing that and you're turning it into a truth. When, like, really, if you think about it, you can't feel fat because fat isn't an emotion. Which, honestly, I hate the word fat because it has so many negative connotations behind it, and I just think that it's been made up into this super negative word when it really doesn't have to be, and like that's just a whole other topic that I could get into, but anyways. So yeah, you can't feel fat, it's not an emotion. So I think that in this case it would be helpful to think about what you actually are feeling. You might be feeling anxiety, you might be feeling shame, you could be feeling all of these other emotions, and I think it's important to actually figure out which emotions those are rather than just saying like, I feel fat. Think about those and figure out where they came from, how they presented themselves in your life in different ways, and then try to figure out how to deal with them individually. Number 9 is labeling, which I actually very heavily incorporated into part 1 without realizing it. I talked a lot about labeling when I talked about overgeneralization, and I think I pretty much covered it. I don't really want to go into it again because I just discussed putting labels on yourself so much. So if you want to know more about that distortion, again, check out part 1. It will be in the description. I'll have a little tag up here so you guys can watch it. And yeah, I'm just gonna move on to the next one, if that's okay with you guys. Which actually, it doesn't really matter if it's okay or not, because when this video goes up and you guys all see it, it's donezo at that point. I can't make changes, so. Number 10 is magnification and minimization. So you know how sometimes when you go places and people ask how you are, and you just say things like, oh, I'm fine, or I'm doing good, how are you? And that's not how you're really doing, but you just don't want to delve into it, you don't want to share. And I know that it's not always the appropriate setting to actually dive into it, because I mean, like, for one, people just most of the time aren't expecting that. this is just an example. I know it's like not a great example, but it's the only one that I have, so. And in that case, you are minimizing things. And I do that with my treatment team all the time. I'll say things like, oh, I haven't lost nearly as much weight as I did in the past, so I'm fine, or I only missed X amount of meals, so it's not as bad. And I'll even laugh to make it seem like less of an issue than it really is. And that's a situation where I myself minimize things. And to be completely transparent, I do that on here a lot as well. I'll kind of giggle and dance around subjects so I don't actually have to go into them. And I will just be like, oh, but like, these are all of the reasons why it's not a big deal, and then I'll just move on. At least I'm outing myself, right? That's the important thing, and that might be helpful for you too. I just realized another tip. Outing yourself, it's not easy. Another thing that can happen is that you do the opposite and you make more of something than it really is and completely blow things out of proportion. So as far as helping with this one, like I said, I still have a fairly hard time with it, so I don't have a whole lot of advice. But I will say one thing that has been helpful is to just really try and pay more attention to when you're doing this, and try to just take a step back and rethink things a little. I know that that's kind of vague. If you find yourself laughing about things a lot, maybe that's your cue to take it a little bit more seriously and present it a little bit more seriously when you're talking about it with others. Number 11, which I don't have enough fingers for, I'm sorry, is personalizing and blaming. And this is my last one, so yay. If you were getting sick of me, I'll be gone soon. You can skip on to another video in just a couple minutes and not have to deal with my ramblings anymore. So this one really hits home for me, and not because I do it, but because I know a lot of people that do it, and it has affected me a lot. People in my life, or some people in my life, I guess, love to make my issues about them, and when it's not related to them at all. And this doesn't have to be the only way that somebody can personalize something though. If you had plans with somebody and they canceled and you took it personally, even though you didn't know the reasons, that can be a form of personalizing, and there's just a lot of different situations where this can apply. And then for the blaming part of this distortion is, I think one big thing that happens in society a lot is solely blaming one person for the result of your actions. And this is a very controversial thing, and I don't want to get controversial on here for the most part. I like to stay as safe as I can, but this is something that I feel like I just wanted to talk about briefly because it definitely fits in with this distortion. Lately online, I have just been hearing so much about people solely blaming Eugenia Cooney for their eating disorder. And sure, she can be a contributor, but I don't think that it's right or reasonable to make her the sole factor, the only reason why somebody has an eating disorder. She could have triggered it, but more than likely you already had some distorted tendencies and thought processes and stressors in your life that played a role as well. So again, like, that's all I'm gonna say on this topic because I really don't want to get controversial. I don't want people coming for me in the comments, but that is just an example of blaming, and it was the only thing that I could think of. It just popped right into my mind because it's been on my mind a lot lately. So if you find yourself solely blaming somebody or something, then I would really, really highly suggest you dive deeper into that as much as possible and really think about the other factors and contributors before you specifically state that it's just a single person or a single thing that caused whatever. And I'm not saying that somebody or something can't be the main cause. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, like, the only cause. Think about it more before you make as broad of a statement as that. Anyways, hopefully I don't get roasted. I'm really sorry, but I just felt like that was something I needed to say. I am all done sharing cognitive distortions and thinking errors with you guys. That was my last one. So let me know if you enjoyed this video, if it was helpful to you at all, if you learned anything new or you just want to chat, leave a comment, you know, do whatever. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.